You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. Well, thank you for joining me on episode number 3. Today, I'm going to be sharing my own personal story that I recorded at the San Jose morning meeting, and this is again in 2019 when we were actually meeting face-to-face. The share here is an experience, strength, and hope type of share, where I cover what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Typically at a meeting when sharing, we usually get about 15 to 20 minutes to share our story, and it goes by pretty quick. At the San Jose morning meeting, we're fortunate enough to be able to have the entire meeting if needed, to share our story. So at a lot of our meetings recently, we've been having first step presentations, which is a little bit different than the experience, strength, and hope type of shares. Step 1 in the 12 steps of SAA is admitting that we were powerless over addictive sexual behavior and that our lives had become unmanageable. In our fellowship, unlike other 12-step programs, we do a written first step, where we cite the progression of our disease, where it started, how it progressed, what specific examples we have of certain type of behaviors and how it escalated over time, and eventually what made us hit bottom and realize that we had to wave the white flag and say that we can no longer do this. After writing our first step, a lot of us will choose to do a formal first step presentation at our meetings where we read what we've written to the entire group. This can be quite a scary experience, but it is so beneficial to get those secrets out that we've been holding on to and let other people know exactly who we are. And just over the past few weeks, I've been able to be witness to several brave individuals who have shared their first step experiences with our groups over Zoom. And I am so grateful for each and every one of those people who have shared their story. And speaking of sharing stories, I originally recorded my second formal first step. My second pass through the steps, I decided to do another formalized first step. My original first step was in 2005, and a lot of new people came into the program since then and hadn't really heard my story. And so instead of doing like a 20-minute share, I thought that I would read what I had written for my second first step, which included a lot of extra behaviors that I was not able to be present enough to write about. I was afraid to bring up certain things. And there's things that I forgot and other behaviors that had happened since I had done my first step. So when I recorded that, I thought that I would use that as something that I could put out on the podcast. After listening to it, I realized that there were a lot of things in there that were not shareable with the public. Sharing my story here today, when I recorded it at the Saturday morning meeting, I tried to generalize things enough that I could feel comfortable sharing it on the podcast. Me sharing this on this episode will, I hope, give other people the courage to be vulnerable and dig deep and to be able to share whatever they need to in a safe way and whatever they feel comfortable with. And there are a few things in this recording that I'm still kind of uncomfortable with sharing on a podcast, but I'm trying to get over that fear and put that story out there into the public. Before getting to the bulk of this episode, I wanted to once again share a few paragraphs from the Green Book. In the first chapter of Sex Addicts Anonymous, on page 4, the top of page 4, the first paragraph for this is just so dense of different types of acting out. We acted out in many different ways. Sometimes we had trouble with one unwanted behavior, sometimes with many. We struggled with promiscuity, anonymous sex, compulsive masturbation, destructive relationships, romantic obsession, infidelity, obsessive fantasizing, cybersex, compulsive use of pornography, including internet pornography, excessive fear or avoidance of sex, prostitution or use of prostitutes, compulsive cross-dressing, phone sex, voyeurism, exhibitionism, sex in public places, inappropriate touching, sexual assault or molestation, bestiality, or other behaviors that involve risk to ourselves, physical, legal, emotional, or spiritual, and harm to others. These are only examples of acting out, and there are many more. The common thread among all these behaviors for us as sex addicts is that we engaged in them compulsively. Our willpower was helpless against them, and they had negative, painful effects. It didn't matter if others appeared to do the same behaviors without ill effect. We could not engage in them without consequence. And this is just, like I said, just so dense. I feel the weight of it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to share this is, that my story mainly involves pornography and voyeurism. Those are my inner circle behaviors. And, this is just my story and not the story of many other people in the program. And I hope to keep talking with lots of different types of people in program to hear all kinds of stories, to see what behaviors they engaged in and how recovery is for them. One of the things that was listed in here is the excessive fear or avoidance of sex. And this comes up in my story here that I'll be sharing. And further down in this chapter called Our Addiction, the first chapter of the book, there is a paragraph at the bottom of page 6 that I wanted to share about avoidance. For some of us, the compulsive avoidance of sex and intimacy became a destructive pattern, dominating our thoughts and actions. We may always have felt unable or unwilling to be sexual, or we may have experienced periods of feeling shut down, alternating with other periods of sexual acting out. We've come to realize that both extremes represent symptoms of the same disease. Whether we were acting out or not being sexual at all, our addiction involved being emotionally unavailable. Being a sex addict felt like being trapped in endless contradictions. We sought love and romance, but when we found it, we feared and fled from intimacy. We neglected or even avoided sex with those who loved us, preferring new conquests, the unknown, and the solitary. So I wanted to share this. It's something that I feel that is becoming talked about more and more at meetings, but my first 10, 15 years in meetings, we really didn't talk about it all that much. In my second trip through the steps, I looked at my acting in behaviors. These are the behaviors that are avoidant behaviors. I hope these passages help with an understanding of our acting out behaviors and our acting in behaviors. And the acting in may not be for everyone, but I know that it has been a part of my past and I am still working on it. And with that, I'll be turning over the rest of the podcast over to sharing my story from the Saturday morning San Jose meeting.
us today for Jason. Will be giving share his or her experience, strength, and hope.
My name is Jason, and I'm a sex addict, and my pronouns are he and him. Anyway, I'm grateful for the ability to speak here. Thanks, Tom, for lending the invitation. I've been in program, I think next month will be 17 years. I grew up, and I apologize if many of you have heard my story. I shared at this meeting last year, I believe, and just recently at the Palo Alto meeting. So I've been speaking a lot and can't remember who's heard what. And this is my personal recorder. I am currently working on a podcast for Intergroup. And I'll get to that in a bit. My inner circle is collecting, downloading, masturbating to pornography, starting with early days videos, magazines, and then internet. Also voyeurism. So, a little about me. I grew up not too far from here, a couple miles down Foxworthy. So this is my pretty close to the neighborhood that I grew up in. Basically, most of my life it was just me and my sister. The neighborhood friends that I grew up with, I'm still friends with today. I've known since we were about 18 months, and my two best friends that I grew up with are also in various types of recovery. They found the rooms much earlier than I did. It was kind of around sixth grade that we all started getting into trouble, and I can get into that in a few minutes. My parents separated when I was about 10, and that was right around the time that I started finding my friends' dad's magazines, and I would take them to my house and masturbate, and that was my first sense of escape that I had. My mom was pretty much a stay-at-home mom, for a long period of time, and then she started working right around that time that they were getting separated. So I became a latchkey kid. Home just me and my sister for a few hours before the parents got home. And so, I had, a certain sense of freedom. Back to my childhood friends. We would take my friend's dad's adult magazines and, look at them in the backyard. We had stolen some alcohol from one of our parents and cigarettes, and we had kind of this little group in our backyards, kind of like an alcohol, tobacco. We didn't have firearms, thank God. For me, the cigarettes never stuck. Alcohol did something for me, but it wasn't the primary thing. Is when I got my hands on the magazines and coupled that with masturbation, that was my go-to thing. My other two friends ended up with drug and alcohol as their primary addictive behaviors. And I'm super grateful for those friends too. They, one of my one of the friends' family is a very recovery-oriented family. They used to do, and probably still somewhat, do meetings here at this church, a men's group for AA. But I was grateful to have them as kind of secondary parents. So since I've been in program, just going over to family functions or parties and things like that, everyone there was recovery based, and so no matter what addiction, we can all talk open and honestly about stuff, and it's like such a different world to walk into, to be able to talk to just a stranger about real shit like we can do in these rooms, and so I'm grateful for that. Shortly after the magazines, we found hardcore videos, and that we would watch over at one of my friends' houses, and that was started a whole new thing for me. As I got into my high school years, I started stealing magazines from bookstores, and I became kind of a porn dealer at our high school. So mostly Playboy and other magazines like that, but I would steal a bunch of copies, and particular issues people wanted to get their hands on, so I stole extra copies of that. I also started getting memberships to local video shops, mom and pop places that had half of their store was regular videos, and then the back room just tons and tons of porns. And I had 2 VCRs, so I would record anything that I rented. So pretty soon, through stealing magazines and through duplicating videos, I started amassing quite a collection of pornography. All this time, I also mentioned in my inner circle that I have voyeurism, and so seeing a sex comedy in the 80s, there was a drill hole that went to a bathroom, and my closet was right next to my bathroom, so I took cue from that and created my own little peephole. Whenever we'd have guests over, I would try spying my babysitters, etc. Later, it would move on to window peeping around the neighborhood. And probably in high school, I moved from my neighborhood on this side of town over to Saratoga. I remember going through the neighborhood there, and apparently one of the neighbors saw and contacted the police. They came to my house. I wasn't arrested, but my parents were notified that there was something, and I matched the description. And this time, I had a camcorder that I would record whatever I did, and so my mom was aware of it, and we had to get my stepdad got a lawyer just in case something happened. Nothing ever did, but just the knowledge that my parents had at that time was that sucked. Big time. But you'd think that something like that would have scared me off of continuing that type of behavior, but it lasted well into the early 2000s. So my last bout of voyeuristic activities was about probably 2 years into program. So it was around 2004 was the last time that I ventured in that. I can remember in college spying on a neighbor, and her boyfriend had caught me and threatened to kick my ass, and that scared me away for a month or two, and then I went out and started doing it again. So I could really understand the compulsivity of that. But when I first came to program, I didn't talk about that for a long time, and as I get there chronologically, I'll talk about that. I was always kind of nerdy, big Star Wars and Rush geek. Kind of grew up with not being. I had girlfriends and stuff, but I wasn't able to put down moves or anything. It wasn't until high school that I started dating seriously. I had met a girl at the beach. Here she was. Her family is from Oklahoma. And we had a long-distance relationship for many years. Looking back at it now, under the light of the hashtag Me Too movement and other things, when my current wife, or my wife, had asked me, kind of the nature of the relationship with this girl, because when I met her, I was 18 and she was 14. Our relationship didn't get sexual for 2 years into communicating with each other. So at that time, 16 and 20, which in Oklahoma, the legal age of consent is 16. In California, it is 18. So violating some rules depending on, or the law depending on where we were. Back then, this is in the late 80s, early 90s. I didn't really see any problems with it, and looking at it now, there might be some amends there that I need to make. I was very friendly with her parents. Anytime that I would fly out to Oklahoma, I would stay with them, and she was very friendly with mine. That being said, having that long distance relationship, we also kind of kept it open. So while we were in high school, we also had our high school boyfriend, girlfriend, that type of stuff. And so I had a girlfriend there, but that lasted a year or two. But during the times that I wasn't active with my girlfriend in Oklahoma, I resorted to pornography and masturbation. And anytime that I would go out to visit her, she requested that I refrain from masturbation probably a month in advance of going, and it was difficult, but I did it. And I don't know if it was on her part to so I would be wanting her, or if it was that she wanted me to be level-headed. As I know, when I'm deep in pornography, my wife has told me that she can pick up different personality traits that I have. I act differently when I'm acting out. So there's some other stuff that I need to explore. It really wasn't until college, or college, is still, basically videos and magazines. This was the early 90s for me. And I was kind of the porn dealer or porn guy in our dorms. So anyone wanted to come watch a movie, me and my roommate had the VCR set up, and people would come over to our room and watch porns, and even the girls on our floor. And I was very open about it. It wasn't a shameful or hiding thing. I took human sexuality in college, and a bunch of us did, and we would openly talk about masturbation and stuff. And at that point, I was just willing to talk all the time about it. And in looking back, I've made some amends around that with friends and family. We would be at we would have parties, and I would always take the conversation into a sexual area, and talk about masturbation and pornography, and when it didn't need to go there. So I know that I embarrassed my sister and my mom and other people and my friends' family that I still need to make amends to. But I can remember, this was, back in the days before smartphones and stuff like that. So going to one of my biochem labs, I had to run overnight experiments, so I'd take a stack of magazines with me, and I remember talking to one of my sponsees, is like, why didn't you just take your phone? I was like, my telephone was connected to a wall, so I couldn't really do that. When I got home from college, is when our family got the internet. We had a nice fast 28.8 modem, so waiting for those days to hop online, and that horrible screech of the modem connecting. Downloading images took forever. I started collecting whatever I could find on the internet, and while the images would load, I'd be masturbating because they took so long to load. I'd also have a stack of magazines with me, and this is after my parents went to bed early, and I would stay up all night and do this, and this became a recurring cycle over and over. And as many of you are well aware, with the internet, the topics, the various kinks, the various things are just the wide gamut. And so I was able to find pornography online that I couldn't find at my local porn shop, that I couldn't find at bookstores where I would either steal or buy magazines. And so the internet became a place where I would start off the evening looking at softcore images, and as the night would progress, it would increasingly get worse. Some of the most taboo subjects I got into were bestiality, incest, and underage pornography. And so the more that I would do it, the lower the standards got for me. And the repetitive nature of it, doing it night after night after night, I became desensitized to the whole thing. So that started for me in the mid-'90s. At this time, I was also going to some local strip clubs where porn stars would show up. I'd get Polaroids with them, and I would usually go socially to the strip clubs with me and my buddies. And, I became, not friends, but, known for being down there with all the bouncers at the club and some of the dancers and stuff. I became a regular, and that was my type of thing. Also, during that time, a friend of mine got married in Las Vegas to a 16-year-old girl, and they, I can remember on their wedding night, they asked me to come to their room with them, and that was kind of the initial start. They were, over the next few years, they were into the swing scene, and I became part of a relationship with them. Was a partner with them, and I would go out to the strip clubs with them. And remember one night they had met someone on a bulletin board and asked if I wanted to have her as the date when we were going to the strip club, and maybe something will happen afterwards towards group sex, and I agreed and was talking with this woman, and we just connected like that, and we ended up talking till dawn, and I just became fascinated with this woman. She was open sexually, and was just the right type of person, fit everything that I was looking for, and I shortly after that broke it off with my friend and his wife in that swing scene, and started dating this woman exclusively. That woman is now my wife. So we would look at pornography together, and stuff, and it was awesome at first, and then I would repeatedly stay online after she would go to bed, and so instead of it being a fun thing for us, it became, went back to being an obsessive thing for me. And I started ignoring her. One day we were married in 2000, and in 2002, she was looking on the computer and found, she knew that I would collect pornography, but she didn't know where it went for me. And so she found some child pornography on our computer and said, this has to stop. And she gave me a list of meetings and resources, and the very first SAA meeting I went to was the Wednesday meeting, which is now in Los Gatos. Back then it was on the Alameda. The people that went to that meeting were all about the problem, not about the solution. So it was in that meeting for about a year and a half, and having chronic slips and relapses, and not getting any better, and knew that I needed to make a change. So started branching off to different meetings, and found a sponsor and said, oh shit, I'm gonna actually start working the steps. So I came into this program to stop my pornography problem. And my first sponsor, when we were working the first step, told me to cut the shit and get real. And this is for you and only you. So it wasn't for my wife. She was not aware of the voyeurism problem that I had in the past. And so I'd been in program a year and a half and only talked about pornography. And so my first step, I started talking about the voyeurism. And it's like, yeah, this is a huge problem. And I remember in the margins, my sponsor wrote ninth step amends. I'm just like, what the fuck? I'm not going to be able to do that. But, thank God, step 9 is far away from step 1. So having a sponsor, he encouraged me to go to the retreat, which was then in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So it was a nice quick drive. That was an eye-opening experience for me, just getting to meet the greater fellowship in the Bay Area, getting to go to workshops and hearing other people's experiences, people who at that time had been 10, 12 years sober, and was amazed. Some of those guys are right now 20, 25 years sober, and really look up to them. But that was a real turning point for me. And I started getting into service right away. At the first meeting on the Alameda, I took up the literature pretty quickly, and then rotated into various things. I helped reformat that meeting from a problems only meeting where everyone just bitched about their wife or their boss and stuff. And it was right about that time that the Green Book was coming out, so we took the format of that meeting and switched it to start reading and going through the Green Book. And we also moved the location of that meeting, and people that wanted to stay in the problem kind of stuck at meetings at that location. People that wanted to go with the solution followed us to the Kaiser Hospital. The Kaiser closed and bounced around, and that meeting is now Los Gatos. So I'm grateful for how that meeting is going. Coming off of one of the retreats, I remember hearing about noon meetings up in the East Bay and in San Francisco. It's like, why don't we have those here in the South Bay? A lot of us work in the Silicon Valley area, and so we started the Monday Santa Clara meeting, and that eventually became 3 meetings over there. So I was really grateful for that. Nice. So I, like I said, I got into service work, did a lot of chairing meetings, secretarying, and it got to a point where I had done enough at the local level and wanted to move to intergroup service, and that was really awesome. I got involved in that right away, and have been doing that for 4 or 5 years. Part of my 12th step of carrying the message to the sex addict who still suffers was an idea that I probably gotten in 2015, and it's taken a number of years to get the ball rolling, but was to do a podcast for SAA. I listen to a lot of recovery podcasts, but most of them on sex addiction suck. And I was hearing some good AA ones. The ones that I heard for sex addiction were mostly damning. You're a sinner, please come to our church and we'll fix you, or buy my book and I'll fix you, and stuff like that. And that didn't jibe with me, and so I wanted to do a podcast for this group, and brought it to Intergroup as an idea, and Intergroup picked it up as a project, and there's funding there for outreach and stuff, and they bought this nice recorder here. And so over the past year, I've been getting closer and closer to getting it ready. Currently, we're going through, Intergroup is switching banks, so there's some stumbling there. But was really wanting to do something like that to help break the stigma of what sex addiction is. A lot of people have in their mind from what they hear in media, what a sex addict is, and what I found when I came in these rooms. I was expecting just complete degenerates, and a lot of us have filthy fucking minds, but we're fantastic people. Just love the people that I've met in this program. And so it's been a real honor to get to know everyone here, and wanted to share that with the greater world. It's kind of a scary thing to do. I've made a number of attempts at recording my story and wanted to self-edit things that I don't want out there. For instance, I had the second time through the steps, I recorded my first step and wanted to use that, and it's like, no, there's way too many things in there that I don't want out there. So, I'm slowly getting there, and it looks like the basic formats that we'll be switching back and forth is just having a one-on-one conversation with someone, kind of interview style, and then after some meetings, it'll just be grabbing some people and having conversations. The fellowship that we have after these meetings, and some of the conversations turn up some huge nuggets of knowledge and information, and it's like, oh, if someone had heard that, that was really awesome what you said there, and it wasn't at meeting level. So meeting level, a lot of us tend to freeze up when the timer comes to me. Oh shit, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? Not listening to everyone else. So to have that as a format for just a natural conversation. So I'm hoping to go that route. I had mentioned that I've gone through the steps. My second round through the steps, I had always known that I had issues with being a sex addict but not wanting to have sex. So very intimidated, very scared of the intimacy. And I picked up a pamphlet at one of the meetings that the ISO had just put out on compulsive sexual avoidance. And years ago at the retreat, I went to workshops on sexual anorexia. Didn't quite identify as an anorexic, but some of the things in that pamphlet about the intimacy avoidance were definite things for me. My acting out behavior was, for me, an isolated thing. I didn't have to interact with anyone. I never. My addictive behaviors never went to prostitutes and having sex with other people. It probably could have, but it never did. So it was always an isolated thing for me. And when my wife would want to have sex, I would kind of freeze up. And I always thought that this was kind of a problem that I had, and realizing that it was something greater. The ISO has since put out working a first step around compulsive sexual avoidance, and there is an intergroup just for they call it ISA, intimacy and sexual avoidance. Now the name has changed over the number of years, and so they're looking at coming up with ways of working all the steps around that. And my second trip through the steps was to cover those issues. And I can say that working the steps around it really helped. Learning to let go and stuff was really a powerful thing for me. And as I close here, I came into these rooms a complete agnostic, argumentative person, with religious people, and wanted to avoid all the God stuff. Reading the literature and hearing other people's shares, I could put aside my old ideas about what spirituality was for me. I feel connected to a higher power while listening to music, while playing music, while being out in nature. Yosemite is a sacred spot for me, and a few other places where I go hiking. I couple hiking with listening to music, and that brings me a sense of peace. And just knowing that was out there, I could start believing in something greater than myself. Being at the retreat and having 100 people recite the Serenity Prayer, there's an energy there. It's just incredible. And so it really got me past my old hang-ups around religion and God and stuff, and it was able to be enough to propel me through the steps and having that in my life. And so I've created playlists of different songs that are spiritually important to me or relate to various topics, anxiety, grief, things like that. And that really helps me and has helped immensely in my program. So anyway, I'm going to close with that, and I am grateful for getting to share here today. Thank you. Well, now that I've shared my story, I hope that it gives you a better understanding of who I am, and I hope that it gives people the courage to be able to share their story, whatever they want to share with the public about their experience, strength, and hope. Each time we share our story, it helps diminish any shame that we may be feeling, and it also helps others identify with the behaviors that they may have as well. Since this is the last of the pre-pandemic recordings that I have, I will be taking time and setting up recordings on Zoom. So there might be a small gap between the first 3 episodes here and the newer ones to follow. Not only am I working on the podcast here, I'm also helping out with the Bay Area Retreat Committee, planning our spring retreat, which will happen in March. So I've got a lot of things to do to keep busy, but I'm hoping with the help of others that we'll be able to get some new episodes recorded and uploaded really soon. And again, if you need any information about Sex Addicts Anonymous, please feel free to visit the ISO's website, saa-recovery.org, or the Bay Area SAA website, bayareasaa.org. And if you wish to leave any feedback for the podcast, please email us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.org. And I will be leaving those links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join us again on a future episode. Until then, I'll talk to you soon. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.